Hello, my name is Tony. Now, although the three subjects of this triple feature review have been uploaded separately to the channel, I thought to do a reformat that puts them all together in one video. Why? Well, they were all made in the 60s, all released in the same year, 1965, and all share certain themes and similarities. The three films explore the subject of human survival in dire circumstances and inhospitable environments, and against seriously unreasonable odds. These elements form a basis representing the opportunity for exciting, thrilling filmmaking, so we hopefully get some exciting, thrilling films, which also in common tickle that good old primal nerve in the viewer, giving rise to the questions, what would I do? How would I react in such circumstances? Whether you choose to watch any of the reviews individually or opt for this marathon attention-straining full Monty version, I would really appreciate any comments, likes or dislikes you may care to bestow. And of course, if you haven't already, subscribing to the channel is always welcome, because every little helps, and I need all the help I can get. Meanwhile, on with the show. Where The Flight to the Phoenix is concerned, I am seriously biased. I never saw it on the big screen, only ever catching it on TV one Sunday evening in the early 70s. I was instantly enthralled and captivated by it, the premise and the execution. I fell in love with it. One of the best masculine-centric action-adventure movies I had ever seen. The passage of time has not dulled or diminished that viewpoint in any way. If anything, I like it more now than ever. It is an exercise in pure cinema, a prime and shining example of the art. That's the problem right there. Makes being objective and critical of it a little more difficult. So much so that there was every possibility that any review I did was going to be little more than a tedious one-sided discourse in which I bang on about how brilliant it is for the duration. After all, who wants to tear down their beloved touchstones of the past? There's plenty of Russell T Davises and Marvels out there to do that for you. With that in mind, I shelved the idea of reviewing it for the channel whilst I contemplated for a little while. Well, alright, for the last 4 years. Then I rewatched it recently and thought, for fuck's sake, snap out of it, you dithering asshole. You want to review it? Review it. Bugger Bogner and damn the tortellini. And with that, here we are. Based on the novel by British author Elliston Trevor, the film makes some cosmetic changes to locations and characters, but generally follows the same direction of travel. A cargo plane is flying from a Libyan oil field to Benghazi, piloted by grizzled veteran flyboy Frank Townes, James Stewart, and his navigator Lou Moran, Richard Attenborough. It is carrying some heavy machinery and sundry produce, along with a mixed bunch of oil company employees and others either heading out for good or on leave. The plane is an old and poorly maintained junker that should have been put out to pasture years ago. Much like Townes and Moran, one could argue. In flight, the radio fails. The plane's engines are disabled when it encounters a violent sandstorm, and Townes is forced to make an emergency crash landing in the Sahara Desert. The survivors of the crash are stranded, miles off course with a dwindling water supply and limited food rations. Here we have an all-male ensemble cast of characters who, not to put too fine a point on it, are fucked. Thus begins a fascinating and masterful exploration of human frailty, inspired invention, and the dogmatic will to survive against the odds. Phoenix is a foundation stone in the bedrock of the survival adventure drama genre, and it's great. What makes it so great then? Well, let's start with the characters and the actors playing them. James Stewart epitomizes homespun American decency, underscored by dark undercurrents of tortured psychological complexity. Many of his characters were prey to uncertainty, misplaced guilt, and latent neurosis. Townes, who automatically blames himself for the crash, logging it as due to pilot error, shares much with the conflicted characters Stewart played in his psychological westerns of the 1950s. And no one does this stuff better. In direct support, Richard Attenborough, tear-pumping, over-effusive lovey or not, was one of the most underrated of British actors. He could channel the seething malevolence of a Pinky Brown in Brighton Rock or a John Reginald Christie in 10 Rillington Place just as easily and effectively as the sad damaged humanity of a loser drunk like Lou Moran. Together, he and Stewart absolutely click and nail it as two world-weary friends, older burnt-out men at the end of something, everything, now facing the end of everything. A crafted and compelling on-screen relationship tinged with bruising poignancy and aching regret. As for the rest of the cast, they may well be stereotypes, but it's the skill of the actors playing them and the director directing them that succeeds in bringing them to life so vividly to a point where it ceases to matter. Peter Finch is Captain Harris of the British Army, a straight-up by-the-book military professional with a dash of compassion and a fatal sense of stiff upper-lip duty. His Sergeant, Watson, Ronald Fraser, is the flip side of that coin, a cowardly, malingering malcontent with a chip on each shoulder. Oil company medic Dr. Renard, Christian Marquand, is escorting company foreman trucker Cobb, Ernest Borgnine, to Benghazi. Cobb seems likely to have what would have been termed at the time subnormality of intelligence. Nowadays, learning disability, I think. He has the mind of a 12-year-old kid, and even that kid don't want it back. He's experienced a mental collapse on the job and is being shipped off home. He's a bit resentful about it, to say the least. George Kennedy, always a welcome sight, is oil worker Bellamy. His friend and colleague Carlos Alex Montoya has a pet monkey in tow. Their friend and colleague Ratbag's Crow Ian Bannon is a belligerent, mocking and intolerant Scot, who, as events unfold, reveals evidence of a softer, more emotional centre. Veteran Hollywood actor of many a cop and cowboy B-movie, Dan DeRay, is the anxious and jittery oil company accountant Standish. For good measure and some added sob story background stuff, there's the doomed Gabriel Tinty, a young man desperate to get home to his physically unwell wife in Benghazi. His leg is crushed by heavy machinery in the crash. Life expectancy therefore, zip. Finally, and most critically in the scheme of things, there is Heinrich Dorfman Hardy Kruger. Dorfman has been visiting his brother, an oil company scientist. To give some indication as to the nature of his personality, a trip to an oil field in a scorching, barren desert was his idea of a holiday. What a lovely vacation site to choose. Scoring well high on the old TripAdvisor ratings, I'd wager. Dorfman pronounces himself a German aeronautical engineer, a factor which is pivotal to the progress of the film. Dorfman is the most stereotypical character, packed to the very brim with all those automatic assumptions about Germans so prevalent in the fictions of the time. He is arrogant, superior, dictatorial, practical to the point of inhumanity, Vulcan-level logical, and driven to impose his will and survive whatever. But you will buy it because Kruger is so damn good, and comes hair's breadth close to outperforming everybody else. Weirdly, at times, he's the most relatable character, and it's a credit to Hardy Kruger that we occasionally see things from his perspective. Yeah, well, he's not wrong, you know. That's how it starts. After wandering around the wreck with a clipboard, taking notes, making calculations, what he proposes is they cannibalize the crashed plane and build a new one to fly them out of the desert to safety. He's even designed it, figured out how to connect the two intact wings to a fuselage, and how the men can be strapped to the wings while Towns pilots the contraption. He's even factored in Gabriel's impending death, which will even the weight distribution if only he'd hurry up. Man, that's fucking cold, even for a master race jockey. And that Dorfman ain't much better. Advised by Renard, Towns eventually agrees, if for no other reason than it will give everyone something to do to distract from the inevitable as they waste away. So does the Phoenix rise triumphantly from the ashes? Who will get to live to see? It's a tense, eventful and compelling journey, getting there to find out. Robert Aldrich, as I have no doubt mentioned elsewhere in other reviews, is one of my all-time favourite directors. I won't burn time on covering that ground again here. One of the reasons I rate him, though, is a particular timeless theme he enjoys exploring in his films. He likes to put people into impossible situations, see how they face those challenges, how they react, how the group dynamics coalesce and shift, and how they wind up in the end. The Dirty Dozen, Too Late the Hero, Ulzana's Raid, later examples of body placed under immense stress, pressured in dire circumstances, put under the microscope and run through their paces. The Flight of the Phoenix is a great place to start. From a time when visual storytelling and character arcs were considered essential components of a film, Aldrich sets up his playground where such things can be delivered in spades. The crash itself plays out as the intro credits roll because it's just an event or device to set the rest of the film up. The main emphasis is trained upon how a disparate bunch of listless quitters are galvanized to action by an idea, a common goal, to become a functioning team working together to save their individual and collective skins. It's not all plain sailing though, far from it. Harris decides to march out to the desert to get help. The army has acquainted him with marching, and he is apparently very good at it. For every argument Frank and Lew throw his way to dissuade him, he counters with a solution. His cowardly sergeant fakes a twisted ankle so he doesn't have to go with him. Carlos signs up in his place. It ends in tragedy. The childlike Cobb wants to go along as well, like it's going to be some sort of kid's excursion to the seaside. He's well up for it, so much so that the other men must curb his enthusiasm with physical restraint. This doesn't stop him sneaking off after them, however, which then results in Frank taking off after Cobb, his feelings of guilt and responsibility over the fates of the men escalating. Dorfman is pissed now because they've lost their pilot, which sort of fucks up his plan of escape. Frank finds Cobb dead from heat stroke and dehydration. Harris ends up back at the plane, exhausted, found by his sergeant, who leaves him to die on the ground and doesn't inform the others. They find him later and he survives this bit. Carlos, however, has been lost to the desert. Dorfman is caught taking more than his allotted water ration. He reasons that he's been working harder than anyone else, so needs it more. He agrees not to do it again, but insists that everyone now needs to work twice as hard to get the plane built. You can glimpse in microcosm how the Third Reich might have worked out right here. A band of Arabs rock up nearby and make camp. They're likely a criminal raiding party. Harris decides to parley with them. There was a common term used as an insult when I was a kid. Someone behaved a bit lively and, well, batshit nuts. They were called a mad Arab. You mad Arab! There was a good reason for it. Anyhow, Dr. Renard goes with Harris to engage the camel jockeys. Next day, the two men are found with their throats cut. That's the reason. Then Gabriel, realising he's fucked, took a while, commits suicide. The load is getting lighter by the minute, but the depression and weight on morale is getting heavier, and it's hardly conducive to a party atmosphere amongst the gang, who now have the threat of the Arabs returning as an added incentive to shift the work up a gear. The killer twist comes when Dorfman reveals to Frank and Lew that although he is indeed an aeronautical engineer, it is in fact for model aeroplanes, toys. Horrified even when Dorfman protests that making model aeroplanes is even more exacting than the real thing. I mean, I used to fucking doubt that, but with Boeing's current track record, Frank and Lew decide to keep it from the others and hide their personal devastation. It's all carefully plotted and structured for maximum impact by screenwriter Lucas Heller. Aldrich directs accordingly, his attention on the effects of the predicament on the men physically captured as time progresses. Faces are increasingly unshaven, sunburnt, blistered, and their toil becomes punishing, excruciating and fraught. They are dying, yet there is that one last grueling push to tow with tethers like weathered and straining mules the reconstructed plane to a flat stretch of land that can serve as a makeshift runway. Cinematography is by Joseph Byrock, who coincidentally lends Stewart's 1946 classic It's a Wonderful Life, an altogether more wintry affair. The vivid colour palette, bright and searing, seems to radiate pulsating heat from the screen, whilst Frank Duvall's score soars magnificently in all the right places, alternatively adding a slightly off-key spacey ambience to some of the quieter dramatic scenes. First time viewing the launch of the reconstructed plane is a real nail-biter. The Kaufman engine, as it is known, needs kicking into life with a starter cartridge. They've got 7. After 4 fail and Frank fires 1 to clear the cylinders, you will be on the edge of your seat. Aldrich allows for a triumphant and uplifting finale, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. I'm not one to knock that. Where others may disagree, I'm happy to claim it's one of the best survival adventure dramas I've ever seen. Sure, the dialogue is cheesy and dated now, but the changing interactions and attitudes of the characters as they collaborate and work together is almost life-affirming. Traumatic events and hopeless circumstances can bring out both the best and worst in people, which is witnessed as Aldrich gradually narrows the window to that final bid for freedom. I've always loved it, especially in the face of those detractors who insist that mechanically the plane wouldn't have worked. Fuck them, it worked in the film and it worked in my head. Flight of the Phoenix didn't fare especially well with the critics of the day and failed at the box office. It needed to take an estimated $11 million to break even, but only racked up approximately $5 million. Considering audience previews were very positive, Aldrich was surprised. He wasn't the only one. I spent years thinking it was a box office hit, purely because it was so good. When older me found out differently, I was shocked, initially, until I figured the awful truth is that some films are just too good for the public. Bloody Philistines. Let me warn you, to prevent a fatal choice being made, that there was an entirely unnecessary remake in 2004 with Dennis Quaid and Hugh Laurie. This being the 2000s, a female character was invented as one of the crash survivors. She was played by Amanda Otto. I suppose the arguments for inclusion and diversity and equality were starting to form around then, and a further argument for justification was made along the lines that an extra dimension was added by the introduction of a strong female character to the mix. They gotta be strong, you know. Don't need saving by no man, no way, no how. Girl power, baby. The only extra dimension it added was the extra dimension of fuck all in the fledgling universe of the Token Tick Box Nebula. The film was a pale imitation of the original and missed the entire point, like an Elon Musk space rocket misses leaving the atmosphere intact. Or the ground, come to that. Fucking billionaire tech for you. If you haven't seen it and survival adventures are your thing, it's one of the greats. Essential viewing. It boasts a stellar cast, terrific acting, stunning visuals, literate script, and muscular direction. Dated, old, technically creaky here and there, but the creative quality evaporates those complaints like camel piss on hot Saharan sands in summertime. No lie. Right, must try and find me a copy of Sands of the Kalahari next. Who'd like to see a review of that? Well, don't all shout at once, will you? Eternal thanks for your time and attention. Feel free to do whatever you choose to do next. Hit like, don't like, comment, subscribe, check out my early access Patreon thing, or even make a welcome financial contribution via the thanks button. I'm very much in survival movie mode now. 2 likely candidates from my dim and distant past I've got my eye on as we speak. We'll see how it goes, pilgrims. Released the same year as Aldrich's The Flight of the Phoenix was this torrid little opus, another plane crash in the desert survival action drama. And although the basic setup is the same as Phoenix, crash survivors struggling to save ass when faced with impossible odds in a harsh, unforgiving environment, the rest is very different indeed. Moving to Britain in the 1950s due to the McCarthy witch hunts in Hollywood, director-screenwriter Cy Endfield formed a working relationship with Welsh actors Stanley Baker. They made Hell Drivers and Sea Fury together. This eventually led to Zulu, the pinnacle of each man's career, and one of the greatest and most popular movies ever made. Their follow-up film was intended to be a screen version of Wilbur Smith's blockbuster novel When the Lion Feeds, which had something of a suitably epic sweep to it. Probably ideal considering producer Joseph E. Levine wanted Enfield and Baker to undertake another project based in Africa following the success of Zulu. Anyhow, that didn't happen, and they chose instead to make Sands of the Kalahari, based on the novel The Sands of the Kalahari by William Mulvihill. Yeah, right, him. Old, Mulvihill. It was something on a very much smaller scale, very budget-friendly. Going from Zulu to this was like a downshift from driving a new generation DAF XG Plus to a Mini Countryman. Compact and bijou can be good though, right? Yes, it can. I'm dead sure it can. The deal is thus: at an airport in South Africa, the flight to Johannesburg is cancelled due to a technical problem with the plane. A Boeing, no doubt. A group of stranded passengers club together to finance a charter flight to get them where they need to be. They are alcoholic engineer Mike Bain, Stanley Baker, young divorcee Grace Monkton, Susanna York, German ex-soldier Grimmelman, Harry Andrews, medical doctor Bondaraki, Theodore Bickle, and big game hunter, late arrival Brian O'Brien, Stuart Whitman. South African pilot Sturdivant Nigel Davenport is more than happy to overcrowd the small aircraft for the dough. En route, the plane collides with a swarm of locusts and crash lands in the desert. The co-pilot is killed. Bain sustains a nasty leg injury, but everyone else manages to get free and clear. O'Brien hangs about in the burning wreck to retrieve his hunting rifles and some provisions, narrowly escaping incineration just before it explodes. What a hero! Well, we'll see. With the scorching sun rising, Sturdivant reasons that if they don't find shade and water, they will fry and die. Setting off on foot across the burning sands, half carrying the wounded Bain, they eventually reach a rocky area with deep fissures, a long deserted bushman cave for shelter, a sparse crop of watermelons, and a plentiful plentiful water supply. Immediate problem being the place is home to a colony of very feral and territorial chacma baboons. Initially, they warily keep their distance, screeching their dissatisfaction from afar, but it's only a matter of time before they start to get braver and more confident about approaching the interlopers on their turf. Bane struggles with a fever and alcohol withdrawal. Sturdivant takes charge, allocating jobs to the others. Then he makes a snap decision to try and rape Grace whilst the others are busy. As division of labour goes, it's not a good look. When she stops resisting, sobs in resignation and goes all passive and limp, this sort of turns him off and he abandons the idea. Instead, he tools up with water tanks strapped to his back, takes one of O'Brien's rifles and announces that he will walk across the desert to the coast to find help. Interesting response to a failed sexual assault. Good luck with that, and off he goes. O'Brien steps seamlessly into alpha male role and sets about pursuing his objective of shooting dead all the baboons. The fact he doesn't have enough ammunition to complete the task doesn't faze him at all. He stalks around shirtless, blasting away, eager to exert dominance over a lesser species. It's not just the baboons though. Grace finds herself attracted to him and isn't shy about letting him know. Likewise, he isn't shy about giving her a good, well, you know what I mean. They are soon involved in a sexual relationship. Whatever's going on with O'Brien is far from normal. He figures help isn't coming and that he and Grace's survival is contingent on eliminating the other males in the group. To this end, he forces the kindly Dr. Bondaraki out into the desert at gunpoint with a minimal supply of water, demanding he keeps going to find help, knowing full well the man will likely die. Next, he fools Grimmelman into accompanying him back to the plane wreck. There, he beats the old guy to death. What he hasn't reckoned with is Bane. Recovering and with his leg healed up, he's been passive in attitude and behaviour up until now, but has figured something is afoot. He's tracked O'Brien to the plane and is a witness to him murdering Grimmelman. Back at camp, he reveals all to Grace. Events are funneling down to a confrontation between Bane and O'Brien, but whose side will Grace take and who will be the last man standing? There are many good reasons to enjoy this film. For one, the acting is consistently high caliber across the board. For a man in the lead role, Baker is quieter and more reserved than you might expect, taking a back seat until the midpoint. When the time comes, though, he lights up the screen, suddenly grabbing audience attention and becoming the character to root for. Susanna York, then 26, has never looked more beautiful or elegantly sexy. Initially cool and aloof, she soon warms up under the desert sun as her genteel facade melts. It's a largely thankless role, unfortunately, one that has her vacillating between demureness and breathless promiscuity. She is drawn as being motivated by fear and sexual desire. She gives herself to O'Brien because he seems to be her best option as lover, protector and provider. So there's an unattractive hint of the mercenary about her. York gives a good performance, but her character is far more unsympathetically written than was perhaps necessary. In the end, even though she sides with Bane, it's uncertain if it's because she's doing the right thing or because he's managed to put O'Brien on ice, displacing him as the top dog, if only temporarily. Harry Andrews has an interesting role as the old German soldier who fought for the Nazis in the Second World War. Interesting because his wartime affiliations are not made an issue in the film, which is something of a novelty, and he's a level-headed and rather paternal soul with a quite humane philosophical quality. Likewise, Dr. Bandaraki, an optimistic, cheerful and good-natured chap undeserving of the fate O'Brien has planned for him. Both Andrews and Bickle were seasoned character actors and deliver the goods on cue. Nigel Davenport's amoral pilot is a bit of an anomaly. One moment he's a self-appointed leader attempting rape because as leader he feels he's entitled to do so. The next he's risking his neck to get help. Nothing adds up about his behaviour because his actions don't make any sense. Whatever motivates him is poorly conceived in Enfield's script. And it's not that Davenport doesn't play it well, because he does. He's as dislikable a study of misogyny on a power trip as you'll ever get. Power trip he abruptly abandons. It's as if he was initially thought of as the main antagonist. Then, suddenly, he's removed from the picture so that O'Brien can go to work. The contrivance to achieve that is one without a rational or convincing explanation. Which brings me to Stuart Whitman. It's the best screen performance I've ever seen him give, and it seems ironic that after this film he faded quickly into lesser B-movies and TV roles. The part was originally intended for George Peppard, but for some reason he dropped out after filming began, and Whitman stepped in at short notice, and it paid off. He is perfectly suited to the part of an alpha male hunter, flexing his superiority complex, ruthlessly channeling his paranoia into murder and taking what he wants when he wants it. Although it winds up being Baker's film in the end for a significant part of it, Whitman dominates. His O'Brien is like some malevolent Tarzan figure stalking his newly acquired domain, burning and shooting the local wildlife in a barely controlled rampage. Whilst there are inexplicable character glitches in the script, Enfield's crisp, no-nonsense direction goes some good way to making up for them. He is unflinchingly pessimistic regarding the boundaries between civilization and savagery, and how little provocation is required for human beings to cross them. To greater or lesser extents, all the characters regress towards more primal levels of functioning. On a hunt for meat, when O'Brien wounds an eland, the taciturn Bane and benign Bondaraki try to finish off the thrashing animal by battering it violently with rocks, whilst O'Brien stabs it repeatedly with a knife. It's a visceral and feral episode in which the men relapse to their caveman roots. No sooner is camp set up than Sturdivant thinks, right, gloves are off here, man, let's rape the girl. Instant regression. Come on, man, it's only been a day in the wilderness so far. As for the girl, Grace, like the lone bitch in a wolf pack of dogs, gravitates instinctively to the alpha, the biological specimen most likely to ensure her survival. Pure lizard brain stuff. Even Grimmelman, when he realises what O'Brien has in store for him, takes control of the hunting rifle and with little hesitation pulls the trigger. Pity for him, O'Brien had enough cunning and forethought to remove the bullets. Oops. In his warped mind, the fact that Grimmelman would pull the trigger on him justifies and reinforces his belief about the threats to his survival, even though he orchestrated the situation. Who exactly are the animals here? In no time at all, cooperation gives way to chaos. The baboon colony, by comparison, has a more cohesive societal structure. They stick together, work together, play together, and finally, attack together. Respect here for the realistic way in which the animals are handled on screen. No inserts from documentaries or National Geographic flicks here. No CGI, folks. These are the real things. Well, mostly. Bane, who at the outset seems the most disorganised personality, is the one who gets his shit together most effectively and collectively. Betrayed by Grace as he lies in wait for O'Brien in the cave, fate smiles upon him and allows him to incapacitate his foe and imprison him in a stony pit, from which it is impossible to escape. Mother Nature, however, throws a random curveball by sending forth torrential rain. The pit fills with water, and O'Brien treads it until he's out. Next day sees Bane resolve to another face-off with his nemesis, at which point a rescue helicopter arrives. Someone made it back to civilization to summon a rescue party, either Sturdivant or Bondaraki. We see the former made it to the coast, only to find himself in an area reserved for diamond exploration, trespassers to be arrested or shot. He's picked up by the diamond mining company security, who don't believe his story of a plane crash. The latter is found by a party of bushmen who give him water and allow him to follow them out to the wilderness. It is the final image that is truly haunting, and the one that will stay with you. O'Brien hides in the rocks and sees Bane and Grace getting rescued. Knowing he will be tried for murder, actual and attempted, O'Brien elects to stay behind in his new habitat. Here he can live out his native hunter-warrior fantasy, only the baboons have other ideas. After he confronts and kills the leader of the colony of primates with his bare hands, wounded and bleeding, he is near collapse. The final moments are an aerial shot of the baboons slowly swarming in on him. Unforgettable. Cinematography by Irwin Hillier, who worked for Powell and Pressburger and lensed the Dam Busters, is so granite hard and diamond sharp in conveying the unrelenting heat of a searing desert environment, it induces actual thirst. You'll be left craving a pint of ice water when it's over. Whilst the score by John Dankworth is a jazzy little workout and broodingly unintrusive partner for the action on screen. Sands of the Kalahari is a different beast to most survival dramas, homing in on the darker psychological aspects and motivations of human animals in a perilous situation. It suggests we are only a fraction away from surrendering to our more primal impulses depending on circumstances. The pleasantries of civilization and the politer social conventions abandoned to the altogether baser dictates of the survival instinct. There are problems with it, most notably Enfield's script fudging the issue of motivation for the behaviours of certain characters, which defy rational justification. As a result, O'Brien is reduced to a paranoid madman, exaggerating out of all proportion the threats posed by the other men in the group. Yet it does dare to be different, and thanks to its remarkably disturbing ending, is something you won't forget in a hurry. Heartfelt thanks for your time and attention. Feel free to do whatever you choose to do next. Hit like, don't like, comment, subscribe, check out my early access Patreon thing, or even make a welcome financial contribution via the thanks button. I think maybe one more to conclude my pursuit of a 60s survival mode trilogy. Pursuit being the operative word for the next outing. Coming right up. So, keep 'em peeled, pilgrims. Released the same year as The Flight of the Phoenix and Sands of the Kalahari, beginning to detect a bit of a theme here. The Naked Prey is the most visceral and primal survival movie of the three. Even today, it still packs a fair old gut-churning wallop. But first, Cornel Wilde. That's a name you don't hear often these days, and I suspect if you do hear it in the genteel embrace of polite company, the response will be along the lines of, "Who the fuck is that?" Well, he was a Hungarian-born Hollywood beefcake pusher who was quite popular in the late 1940s through the 50s, running into the early 60s. He never quite achieved the same star status as contemporaries like Rock Hudson and Tony Curtis, and never generated the same household name mass appeal. He was, however, a different kettle of matinee idol. Initially, he was under studio contract, but in the 50s went freelance, a daring move back then, formed his own production company, Theodora, with his wife, and pursued an interest in writing, producing and starring in his own movies. Kirk Douglas and others travelled much the same route. Douglas peaked in his venture with Spartacus. Wilde did the same with The Naked Prey, his best film. So if you didn't know who Cornel Wilde was, check out his classic 50s noir, The Big Combo, his grueling 1967 war flick, Beach Red, his 1970 post-apocalyptic scripting and directing gig, No Blade of Grass, and most importantly, The Naked Prey. He's something of a minor discovery for the uninformed. It's colonial-era Southern Africa, and a safari is launched from a fort. The funding fucker, father of the trip, known only in the cast list as Second Man, Gert Vandenberg, is an ivory trader out to bag elephants for their tusks. The guide for the venture, monikered in the cast list simply as Man, Cornel Wilde, leads the way. When they encounter a party of indigenous tribesmen, their leader requests a customary tribute or gift. It's a traditional thing. Man strongly advises his boss that paying up is the expedient thing to do to avoid any unnecessary complications down the pipe. But the arrogant fuckwit will have none of this presumptuous, impotent extortion stuff. He insults the leader of the tribesmen and barges him out of the way. Yeah, way to win hearts and minds there, dickhead. After wiping out half the elephants in Africa, the group make camp and kick back, which is when the tribesmen attack with spears and arrows and butcher everyone apart from one or two bearers and the white men. They are taken captive and hauled off to the tribal village. One is dressed up like a wild turkey by the women and made to run a gauntlet, finally getting stabbed by multiple tribespeople with multiple spears. Another is slathered in clay, placed on a wooden spit and roasted like a rotisserie chicken. Farewell, my old China. And Second Man is trussed up and forced to confront a venomous cobra, which bites him in the eye. That'll no doubt see him off, all for the sake of parting with a few coins or trinkets. It was the principle of the thing, you say? That's the trouble with misplaced principles. vegetables. No good at all when you've got an angry snake in the chops, or indeed something of a similar nature. But what of Man, the main man? Well, he's given something of a chance. He's stripped stark naked. Then one of a party of hunters from the tribe fires an arrow in the air which plunges into the ground in the distance. Man is made to run. When he passes the fallen arrow, the first of the hunters gives chase with his spear at the ready. And this boy has moccasins on his feet and is fucking fast. One by one, when a warrior passes the arrow, the next sets off running. Man is going to be hunted through the jungle until he is caught and killed. So begins the pursuit and the narrative direction for the rest of the film. Man isn't just going to give up and let himself be killed though. Early on he strikes lucky. The first hunter gets within range and throws his spear, but he misses. Running out of steam, Man picks it up, turns and impales the hunter with it. He strips the dead warrior of clothing, footwear, oversized knife and water sack. He's tooled up now. The next pursuer overexerts himself and drops dead of exhaustion and heart failure, coughing blood. The third one, Man ambushes from the rear and spears in the spine. He can't afford to hang around though, got to keep moving because there are plenty more headed his way. 8 on his tail. The chase is on. Cornel Wilde is not the best director you'll ever encounter and certainly not the best actor. I mean, really not the best actor. What fights his corner for him is his willingness to confront subjects in a very direct and uncompromising way. For the time, The Naked Prey was groundbreaking in taking the traditional jungle adventure tropes of your average Tarzan film and eliminating all the comfortable fantasy heroics and cute cuddly wildlife chums in favour of something very stark and primal instead. It's a progressive approach that some might find a little too subversive and alienating. The film doesn't pull any punches in its condemnation of both the slave and ivory trade. This stall is laid out early doors. Such practices are presented unequivocally, as they were indeed vile and reprehensible stains on the moral and ethical souls of humanity. The extermination of herds of elephants for financial gain and the sheer sick fun some derive from it hits home in realistic scenes of slaughter. When the main man challenges his employer's wanton massacre of non-ivory bearing animals, he pompously retorts with something about being entitled to his sport. Although our main man is no Boy Scout and hardly blameless by way of his willing participation for money, there's a sense that he's had enough of this shit. When his employer announces he thinks he'll go into the slave trade next, as casually as he might inform, "I think I'll wear my yellow socks tomorrow," main man backs away from any idea of a partnership. This is his last safari, after which he is retiring to his farm. He looks jaded, as though the creeping realization has finally caught up with him that this maybe isn't the best way to make a buck. It's no excuse, but it's a positive when someone starts to wise up, to reflect on the evil shit they're involved in and make plans to disengage. There's no doubt that Second Man is a repugnant piece of human garbage whose supremacist attitude stinks. His refusal to provide the tribe with a token sum as a symbol of cursory respect is followed by a tirade that questions what right the natives have to be there anyway. The answer is in the word native. It's their fucking country you're trampling through, you ignorant dolt. The irony is that he and those like him are the ones who are intruding where they don't belong, doing things they shouldn't be doing. You really look forward to this repulsive scumbag getting schooled in the error of his ways. He wouldn't pay the nominal tribute, but he will pay in the end. Unfortunately, so will everyone else in the general ballpark. Although he's our protagonist, Man is still no less part of the problem. If we're willing him to prevail and escape, it's because here he's the underdog, outnumbered and outgunned in hostile territory. And we do so like an underdog because they're much like us ordinary folk, and we can relate. Sometimes he doesn't do himself any favours. When he sets a brush fire to put a lethal barrier between him and his pursuers, he joyfully leaps up and down, shouting such apocalyptic wish-fulfillment missives as "Burn, you devils!" Later, though, he comes across a native village and witnesses it being attacked by slavers. He, like us, is appalled at the horrifying assault as they burn it to the ground, murder those they don't want, and take captive those they do. Encountering a little girl hiding on the perimeter in a redemptive moment, Man leads the slavers away from her, killing some of them, but ending up tumbling down a waterfall into a river. The little girl rescues him from drowning and becomes his travelling companion for part of his journey, before turning back to return to her home territory. It's a gentle and touching interlude as they walk along swapping songs. The girl sings a tribal chant whilst Man opts for Little Brown Jug. It just about swerves being mawkish and twee, managing to hit the right note of subtle poignancy. Wilde throws himself into a physically punishing role, burning up under the relentless sun, running to exhaustion, eating raw snake to stave off starvation. The physical combat and death scenes are brutal, vicious, thrillingly savage, excluded from peak realism by the presence and colour pop of some liberal use of well-faked Kensington gore. Filmed on location, there is a terrific aura of authenticity to it, supported by a soundtrack of tribal drumming and chants. The verbal interactions between the leader of the hunters, Ken Gampu, and his crew are kept to native dialects. No pidgin English dialogue or subtitles, yet we can mostly glean effectively the gist of what is being communicated. Kill Whitey, mostly. However, detracting from what, for the most part, is a stripped-back and largely unique survival pursuit thriller is the overuse of wildlife inserts sourced from stock documentary footage. Most concern indigenous predators stalking and attacking their prey. After a while, you're thinking, yes, okay, we get the metaphors, hunter or hunted, kill or be killed, fight or flight. Can it with the National Geographic shit, could ya? How many lions taking down a wildebeest or leopards chomping on a zebra ass do we actually need to see? Then there's the sneaking suspicion that man in a real-world situation wouldn't have lasted very long. The hunting party are a fit, young, skilled, powerfully athletic stalk and kill unit in an environment they know well. They move faster than stink off a shovel. Man would have been buzzard meat in minutes. Don't let any of that put you off, though, nor the perceptible racist overtones, which are far less pronounced and stereotypical than in most other films of the decade. At least Wilde goes out of his way to establish some balance. What you get is a raw, propulsive, thrilling survival chase nightmare scenario that beats Bonnie and Clyde and the Wild Bunch to the punch in advancing the graphic depiction of physical screen violence. It would have been detrimental to the film's box office potential, I imagine, if man didn't survive in the end. But at least it finishes with a mutual, respectful acknowledgement between him and the leader of the hunters. Whereas, if it had been me, I'd have probably just given him the finger. Nah, just kidding. Probably. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Feel free to do whatever you choose to do next. Hit like, don't like, comment, subscribe, check out my early access Patreon thing, or even make a welcome financial contribution via the thanks button. That's probably enough existential threat for the moment. Thus, I think next up will be something a little bit different. So, stick around, pilgrims, because the future is almost here. Yeah.